Welcome to the hands-on part of our Kubernetes deployments discussion. Before I show how to do a deployment, I just want to show that I have a Kubernetes cluster running on Azure, and it just has one node. And the deployment that we're going to do is for Nginx, and this is the deployment manifest file that we're going to pass to the API server. Here we are specifying the deployment name, and then this is the label for the deployment. In this section, we specify how many pods we are going to run for this deployment. In this case, it's 3. This, if you remember from our discussion earlier, this is the part that is handled by the ReplicaSet object in Kubernetes. And this is very important to understand that here we are telling the deployment controller that the pods that are supposed to be managed by this deployment are the ones that has this label. Okay. This is where the pod definition is starting. And right away you can note that here we are specifying that the pods that we're going to run is going to have this label. So this is what is establishing the link between the deployment and the pods that are running. And this, as we saw in the slide discussion, is the container part. And here we are just saying to run an Nginx container, this specific image, and the container listens on this specific port. Okay, let's apply this manifest file and create a deployment. Before we do that, let's just see if there are any other deployments running. There shouldn't be any. So there are no deployments in the default namespace. And now let's see if there are any pods running. There are no pods. So the way to pass any manifest file to the Kubernetes API server is through this Kubernetes apply command. Okay, the deployment got created. So let's list the deployments now. We are seeing the Nginx deployment. And here we are seeing that we have 3 pods running for this. We can also list the pods. And we're going to see that we have 3 pods associated with the Nginx deployment running. Let's further see the details. So we have this Kubernetes kubectl describe command that emits additional details about an object. So we're going to say describe deployment. We're going to specify the deployment name. So this has a lot of useful information, but the things that I want to highlight right now are, first, look at the selector. As we talked about it in the manifest file, that we are going to manage, this deployment is going to manage the pods that have this label. And then you can also see the image that we specified. It's being shown here, and other useful information. One more thing to check is the event section, because we're gonna come back to this when we're gonna do the rolling update. But here you can see that it just logged the event, that it scaled the replica set from 0 to 3 pods. Okay, let's do a rolling update now. In order to do a rolling update, we will modify our deployment file. And first we will add some specific parameters associated with the rolling update. So this is telling the history of the replica sets. You saw in the slides that the old replica set configuration would be retained. So this is telling Kubernetes how far back do we want to go, so that we can roll back up till that version. So here we are retaining the last 5. So we can roll back to the 5 previous versions of this deployment. Next, very important section to note is the strategy. Here we are explicitly specifying the strategy, and that is the rolling update strategy. And furthermore, we are specifying the parameters for how the rolling update will happen. Okay, without going into too much detail into each and every parameter that we added, I've mentioned the ones that matter to us and that are related to the rolling update deployment that we would be doing. And now in order to do the update, we will just bump up the version of Nginx, use a newer version of Nginx. And once again, we will send this new deployment manifest file to the API server using the apply command. The update completed. And now if we get a list of pods, you'll see that all these pods are recent with this age. And we can get an idea of what happened by looking at the events. So remember, we just saw this one event. And here, if you follow this sequence, you can correlate to what we discussed in the slides, how rolling updates work. So this is the new deployment that got created. And it added one node to the deployment and then removed one from the older deployment. So from 3 to 2. And it kept doing that until we reached to 3 nodes. I keep saying nodes, 3 pods for the new deployment and 0 pods for the old deployment. Okay. So here we can see how in practical, how the deployment rolling update worked, just as we discussed in our slides. And also let's look into the pods. So if we pick any of this pod, we should see the newer version of Nginx. Here it is. Now let's do a rollback. So for rollback, we just need to run this command. Currently, it's going through the process of rolling back, and now it should be done. It's still going. Now it's done. And now when we look at the pods and we just describe one of the pods, we will see the older version of Nginx. So here we have 1.14. Okay, let's also see the events within the deployment. So now you can see from here, remember this was the older deployment. So now it's scaling up the older replica set and scaling down the newer replica set. And it keeps doing that until we get to 0 for the new replica set and 3 for the old replica set. So here it's reaching 3 for the old replica set. And one thing to note here is this message. So we don't see the old message for the old replica set going down to 0. We just see from 3 to 2. But here Kubernetes basically just aggregated that message into this one message. So that's why we are not seeing this like a separate message for that. But we can see from the pods that we only have the older Nginx version running from the pods. And that means that the pods for the new replica set were all deleted. So this was our quick but very interesting hands-on for deployments in Kubernetes. And we learned quite a few things from this hands-on. So this concludes our hands-on for Kubernetes deployments. And we covered quite a few topics in our hands-on, and it's great to see things in action. And in the next hands-on, which is for services, things will become even more interesting because we are going to access the applications running as part of this deployment. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next discussion on Kubernetes services.